Thank you all for tuning in. The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch III, coming to you live from the Palatial Studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of in the beautiful city of Malden, Missouri. And joining me from a more than acceptable safe social distance is my guest for today, Amanda Quick. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Central Oregon.
Oh, okay, sweet. I like Oregon. I used to live in California. When I was a kid, we used to go up to Oregon because I had family up that way. And I remember driving up the one and seeing the little roadside attractions and stuff. Very cool place. Wouldn't mind getting back one of these days. But the way I normally start the show is with the same question. What are you reading?
Oh, what am I reading?
Mm-hmm.
I am currently on the last Outlander book that came out about a year ago. I'm most of the way through, about 90% done with that. I'm somebody who has like 4 books open at once. So depending on what I'm working on. So that's the like for pleasure book. And I just finished a book, but off the top of my head, usually there's a personal development book in there too, depending on what's going on. I have a friend who just published a short story that I'm eager to open also.
Cool. You might not remember the name of it, but what did you get out of the personal development book that you were just reading?
So the one that I just finished, it's really about how our beliefs create our reality and how true that is at a core level. And even when we don't think that's what's happening, there's this unconscious belief that's driving our actions and our motivations and what that looks like and how we can shift it.
Okay. That's very important if we don't like our reality, figuring out how to shift it.
Yes.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story I've probably told way too many times on this show. Back when I thought I was going to be an actor back in the 90s, I was at a roadside cafe with some of my fellow actors. And there was a gentleman in the center median of the street that we were on barking at cars. And at one point, he sat down, ate his lunch, and then returned to barking at cars again. And it occurred to me that this was his reality, and that it made perfect sense to him. And even though it doesn't make perfect sense to me, and so it occurred to me that our realities are like Venn diagrams. Most of our realities overlap a lot, but his reality didn't seem to overlap so much with mine. There were certain areas, like if you went to work, you took a lunch break. but yeah, and it occurs to me that we could definitely change those realities with the proper help. But
yes.
Cool.
Exactly.
Now, I noticed you wrote a book, "The Sex Trafficker's Wife."
I did.
With the in my history with radio, we've had a lot to do with human trafficking, and on the good guy side of it, not the bad guy side of it, obviously. And so that really interested me when I saw that in your bio. And how did you come to write the book?
Well, it's a memoir. So it's a story of the worst time in my life. My ex-husband, and in 2016, was arrested for attempted human trafficking. And I was a stay-at-home mom. We had 3 kids. They were 1, 4, and 5. So to say my world exploded is a vast understatement. Sure. And I had no idea who I was actually married to. he had basically been living double lives. And his version of story was very different than what he was arrested for. And he basically showed up at a sting operation trying to purchase 2 children. And his story was that he was soliciting adults and not children. And yet that's what he was arrested for. And I deeply wanted to believe his story because he's married to the man. I had his children. And because of a lot of my own childhood trauma, I chose to believe him at first. And I stayed and I supported him through his criminal proceedings. And in privileged white America, a upper middle class white man only gets probation for such things, which at the time I celebrated. And he retained his constitutional rights to parent, which meant he had unsupervised access to our children, which again, at the time I celebrated. A couple of years later, I started to see, as I unwound everything and processed my emotions and what he was admitting to and what I was feeling and all of the things, I started to see the mental health issues. I started to see the incongruencies. I started to see the manipulations and the gaslighting. And I started to separate myself from him. And in doing that, I was no longer in this bubble. And I started to see more and more truths to things. And then I started to see the grooming behavior targeted our children. And I started to see my own kids being groomed by their father, and to feel like there was nothing I could do to stop it because he had his right to parent. And I had to prove that they were in danger enough that something had already happened, not that something might happen, because that's the way the system is set up. It's not protective, it's only punitive. And so after 18 months and $75,000 in court to fight a registered felony sex offender for custody, I finally succeeded. But it took a huge shift in myself. I had to take accountability for my part. I had to realize what I had chosen not to see, and I had to understand how I had contributed to the situation that I was in. I had to take accountability for creating my reality, in a sense. And I had to do so in such a way that meant, despite in the middle of an active PTSD and panic attacks at every interaction, I had to take action and take charge of the situation. And that's how I got out of the situation. And when I got out and I got full custody, which happened literally 2 weeks before the pandemic shut the world down, I realized that I succeeded at something that most people don't. And that I had an immense amount of privilege, both economic, racial, and social privilege, to have this fight. And that money wasn't what got me to succeed, but it allowed me to begin the fight. And I had to have a huge shift in myself in order to succeed at this. And so not only am I not the only person to have been married to somebody who did horrendous things, but most people end up sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers. And most people are so stuck in the shame and judgments to ever talk about it. And so it was super important to me to share my story, to speak about the things, to take accountability for my part, to help other people know they're not alone and that there is a way through and there is a way to change. And that's essentially why I wrote the book.
Kind of curious, because we're stuck in our realities, whatever they may be, however positive or negative.
Yep.
People don't tend to see the unreality of it, the conflicting realities, because
yes.
you're stuck in the middle of this thing. What was it that
you're
opened
in the
your
hall
eyes?
of mirrors. You can't see through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't see out.
This is the fun part of the story, and this is the woo-woo part that not everybody aligns to. But I was in therapy, right? They were doing all kinds of therapy, EMDR things to try to help me calm my nervous system. And, I was, like I said, diagnosed with PTSD. And so my therapist was trying to work with me, but even she was kind of appalled by what was happening in the system. And as I was leaving her office one day, she says, "Have you ever thought about seeing a psychic?" I was like, "Are you crazy? Like a fortune teller?" What? And she says, "No, I know a good one." And I was like, "Well, fuck it, right? I'll try anything," because at this point, my children had disclosed all kinds of things. The court wasn't doing anything. CPS was useless. Like that was my rock bottom. It's like, fine, I'll go see you later, lady. Let's see what happens. And I went to go see this psychic and trying to keep an open mind, crystals, deities, all the things everywhere. And, like, what is this lady going to say to me that I don't already know or that my lawyers couldn't help me with? And when she sat me down and started to tell me a story about a previous lifetime of mine 500 years ago, where I was with the same person, and back then his deviant, he was an alcoholic and he was physically abusive instead of sexually deviant and mentally and emotionally abusive, but the energy was the same. And she started to tell me this story about the reason I stayed, and that I stayed and I protected the kids. And I didn't think I could leave, and I was trying to keep the family together. And it was like she was in my head, because these are all the things that I was telling myself about why I stayed in my marriage and why I had to support him, and all of the things going on in my mind. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. Like, clearly there's something here. And then she starts to tell me that in that lifetime, he beat me to death. He threw me down the stairs and in front of the kids. And my whole body just started to like have this fear response. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was terrified of the man. And he'd never laid a hand on me. But he stalked me. He walked back and forth in the house. He would try to manipulate my thoughts. He did this thing that was called false equivalence, where he would try to say I'm just as bad as him because I dated. And, so that's the same as trying to, solicit children or something. Like he would play on every insecurity that I had to make me feel like I was the problem. I was terrified of him, but my body remembered this fear response. And so she said, you have to get a handle on that fear, because that's not then. We're at a place where you can own property, you can do your own things, and you're not bound by a lot of these things that happened 500 years ago. And so I'm like, okay, I'm listening. Like, you've got me. I hear you. And then she says, the reason you're sitting in this chair, the reason your angels created this appointment and that you're here today is because you haven't chosen. It's like, what do you mean? I haven't chosen. I'm fighting for custody. I've hired all the people. I've done all the things. And she says, no, you haven't chosen. And it was in that moment that I saw myself more clearly, because she was right. I had been taking all of these actions. I had been taking all of these steps and doing all these things because I saw that this was unsafe. But there was another part of me, this alternate reality part, that said, I don't want that to be true. I don't want that to be, there has to be another explanation. I couldn't have been that wrong about him, right? There's maybe there's a world in which he can heal and we can be a family again, because a part of me still deeply wanted that. And so both things were true at the same time. And because of that, because I wasn't taking accountability for the fact that I contributed to keeping this relationship alive, and that I contributed to not choosing to see how deeply wounded and how deeply traumatized he was and what that was doing to my kids, I actually hadn't chosen to be done with him. There was a part of me that wasn't ready to let it go. And that moment was when I was able to make that choice. I said, I'm done. And she says, no, you got to mean it. It's like she called me out beautifully. And so I stood up and I said, I'm done. And I could see almost this air dissipating. And I shut down every possibility of us ever having any relationship again, whether it was a co-parenting relationship, a friend relationship, a romantic relationship. I shut it all down. And I said, I am no longer participating in the choices you are making, period. And 6 weeks after that session was my final court hearing. And that's when I received full custody. And it happened really fast, because up until that moment, it was very, very likely that I was going to share custody with him.
That is just incredible. Of course, you also said that you believe in the power of our stories to change the world.
Yes, I do.
And what exactly do you mean by that?
So I deeply believe that every human out there, right? Every person on this planet has a deep desire to feel seen, heard, understood, to know they're not alone. We're not isolated, we're not people that go live in the woods by ourselves. That's not the human condition. We are here to be in connection, in community, to learn from one another. That is what humanity is. And yet most people don't actually truly feel seen by other people around them. They wear masks, they hide, they don't share their hearts, they don't feel safe to do so. And I believe that by sharing our stories, especially the really hard ones, the ones that people usually keep buried in the closets and never talk about, the things you don't say at the dinner table, the things that happened way back when, the reason that people go to Ancestry DNA and go, oh my God, we just blew up our family because nobody talked about that ever. All of those stories, those are how we actually make real connections. Because if I'm willing to be seen in my most vulnerable state, if I'm willing to speak the mistakes I made that caused my kids and myself to be in unsafe situations and take accountability for that, then I open the door for somebody else to feel seen and heard and know they're not alone, and to let go of the judgments that we all hold on ourselves. Because that's our fear, is that other people are going to judge us. But really, we're the ones who judge us. We say the worst things to ourselves more than anybody else could. And if we're able to let those judgments go, because we know we're not the only ones, and that it's safe and it's okay, and that we're learning and that's the point, then we can release so much of this trauma that gets held onto and repeated. Because the point of the experience isn't to hide it away, but it's to learn from it. And the only way we're going to do that is if we are willing to talk about it and share it and help other people through it. Because today, I look back on my story and I have gratitude, which people are like, what? That's crazy. Why? But I wouldn't be who I am today without it. I wouldn't have learned what I've learned. I wouldn't be the parent I am today without that experience. And I'm truly grateful today for that lesson, because I'm able to share it to help other people feel seen, and to know that it created this person I am now that has so much more that I want to go do in the world.
I can relate a little bit. My issues are in my brain, not in the world around me. I struggle with major depression and ADD, which is an interesting combination. But yeah, several years ago, I was in a position where I was telling myself that you can't share this with anybody. You can't. It's actually, before that, it was that this is normal. This is the way people are, because you're not abnormal. And then as I grew, it was like yeah, you can't share this with anybody. It's they'll talk down to you, they'll lock you up, they'll do something bad. And then one day I just took a deep breath and said on the show, this is my reality, and shared it with the world, and it didn't collapse in on me. I found support. I found a therapist who helped, and yeah, and even today, we talk quite frequently about mental health issues, and yeah, I even tack on the 988 hotline at the end of the ending credits, so in case somebody needs a little help. But yeah, and yeah, it changes the world when you can talk about what you're going through, the vulnerability, exactly, as you said.
Yeah, and other people who hear you and hear you talking about it can say, wait, maybe I can talk about my stuff too. Yeah. Maybe I'm not actually all alone in this. And that's really, really powerful for somebody going through stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think the key for me was the therapy, was finding somebody who could help, and finding the right person. That was the tough part. My first attempt at getting help wound me up at a psychiatric nurse practitioner who didn't like to treat things with she's like, nope, not giving you anything. And yeah, that was like, thank you, but no thank you, and led me on the path to other things. But yeah, it's interesting that you that the key that the key seemed to be the psychic.
Yep.
That's definitely a quarter you don't often think about.
No, and honestly, it was really somebody who saw me clearly, right? Whether that be, a therapist for somebody, it's not one size fits all. And somebody needed to see me clearly, and it had to be somebody that could call me out that I would hear. And I was looking for the answer. I just wasn't looking directly in the mirror. And I think that a lot of the times that's what we do. And we're, whether you find a therapist or a life coach person or a psychic, or it doesn't matter, but somebody that you feel safe with, that can see you and can speak frankly to you, that you trust. Like that's really important, because if not, we stay isolated and we refuse to talk about the hard stuff. And that's not how we get through.
Yeah. Definitely one of the most important things to recovery is getting that structure built up, and it takes a lot of people to build up a good structure. But yeah. So let's see. Let's tell me about was it Amanda Quick Healing?
Yep. Yeah. So that business has evolved over time, right? So after I got full custody of my kids and the pandemic hit and everything shut down, I went on a seeking journey, because I had all of a sudden been open to, wait a minute, maybe psychics know something. Maybe there's more to the universe. This new dimension of understanding was opening up, and I wanted more, because the way my brain works is, if they can talk to spirits and angels, I can too. I just need to learn how. And so I immediately set out to figure out what was true for me and how I wanted to learn the complexities of trauma healing, because there is a overlaying mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical layer that all intersects and connects in the way that we, the mental conversations we have that impact our emotions, that do directly impact our physical experience, both health wise and in our reality. And I wanted to understand how this all overlaid and connected. And so I went down this journey. I started learning energy healing modalities. I started learning how to work with our mind and our emotions and our body. And so I started offering classes, courses, sessions, things like that, especially through the pandemic. And then it shifted recently, and now it's really focused on speaking and sharing more parts of my story. And I still do offer sessions with people if they desire that, because sometimes I'm the safe person for somebody else. Sometimes I'm the only one that they feel understands them, and I want to have that space available as well. And so, to me, that's kind of my platform to share the things that I realize, because I'm still learning and growing. I still have challenging times, and I still parent 3 children who went through a whole lot of trauma, and we have all kinds of experiences that are challenging still today. And so I still deeply want to share those stories and to help people in all kinds of different ways.
Now, just to make sure the children are being helped and they are growing
Yes.
in a more proper direction now, and all that. I mean, I won't ask if they're okay, because that just seems like a really stupid question.
Yeah, they're 9, 12, and almost 14 now. So
wow,
life has changed. Obviously, we got teenagers, which is a whole different
Yep.
whole different set of challenges. And they are doing really well, but they have their own, they had to process the loss of a parent, and despite the benefits of it, there are still lots of emotions about it. They've had to process, their own mental and emotional challenges as well as physical challenges. And so, they continue to teach me and push me, and, as children do, as they should.
Sure.
But yes, in the grand scheme of things, they're doing very well.
That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, because we're morbidly fascinated with the terrible things, but it's like, yeah, really, shouldn't we be looking toward the bright future or brighter future? Uh,
we should.
But,
we should.
Yeah.
I think that we're fascinated with the terrible things because we're looking for validation for our own terrible things.
Yeah, we are kind of a little terrible when it comes down to it. Some a little more terrible than others, but yeah, yeah. My foundation is in Christianity and the belief in salvation through Jesus, and you made me think of that in Genesis where it says it's not good for the man to be alone, and it's not good for any of us to be alone. We're social creatures. We're designed to be that way, and
yes,
and yeah, we definitely need to do that. But of course, there are more things in heaven and on earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, and anybody's philosophy, really.
Correct.
Sorry, I once tried to be a Shakespearean actor.
I mean, there's so many parallels to all. There's so many parallels to all the faiths, and I think the important part, whatever you name your God, whatever you name spirit, universe, Jesus, doesn't matter. Like, to me, that's language. It's about how you show up in the world and how you learn lessons and how you share them and how you resonate with the people around you. That's the important part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very important. You love others as you love yourself, and hopefully you love yourself. If you don't, then you got some work to do. But wanted to. I keep looking behind you and seeing the picture of the chrysalis and the lady with the butterfly wings and all. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was a friend of mine did this painting, and I just saw it and had to have it. But it's very resonant to my life in a lot of ways. And, going through really hard things, going through big traumatic experiences really does transform you. And I don't know if you know, but a caterpillar actually completely dissolves into liquid before it turns into a butterfly.
Yeah, it's really gross.
And it is. You go to goo, and it's actually really true of what happens when you go through things like this. You have to literally unlearn and unprogram everything that you thought was true about yourself, other people, the reality, and that level of tearing all of it out and really getting to this point where you feel naked. You are nothing but this human body, and everything you knew was wrong or different or not the way you thought. And it's a huge transformation because we hold so tightly to those identities. And when something shakes it apart so drastically, all you can do is curl up and process the feelings and release. And eventually a transformation happens. And that's what helps you then transform into the butterfly, be the rising phoenix, however you want to look at that. But to me, it's such a beautiful visual of the opportunity and the gift inside all of the challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. My transformation, my chrysalis began when I first learned that I was not indestructible. It was quite dramatic. It wasn't. I'd broken bones and stuff before, but that was like nothing. I caught fire and had severe burns to both hands, and I resisted the change because it was too horrible to imagine, to think of, and so I held on to that pain for a long time. Eventually got the structure to get out of it, found the people who could help, and it's a hard lesson to learn.
It is. So, it is, and we all resist it. We always it's it's normal in a lot of ways to resist it. I resisted mine. I stayed and convinced myself that, he wasn't that bad and all the things. And
Right.
it's the same kind of resistance. It just looked different. And there's the cognitive dissonance where something is so far outside of the reality we've created that we can't until we literally can't not. And that's what breaks us down in a sense and invites us to be open to that transformation when we stop eventually resisting it.
For sure. Let's see, what else did I want to ask you about? Let's see, account advocate. Well, what was it that actually led you to write the book? Did the book come first, or did the speaking come first?
The book came first. So the book was, almost as I was even going through the end of the chaos, people were like, this is like a soap opera, because every week was some new thing. And there was like hostage negotiations going on between transfer of kids. Things were at the high conflict of high conflict. And there was parental alienation, gaslighting, personality disorders. We just piled it all on. And it was like, I can't live life like this. And yet this is the cards I'm dealt. And every time I would be processing and talking through it, whether it be my therapist or friends or anything else, it was just this, how much more can we keep going? And then all of a sudden, it was over. And here next week will be 4 years of zero contact. I have heard not a peep, not a text message, not an email, not a phone call, not a dime since the late April of 2020. And when you go from that really, really high nervous system spiking, all the things, to nothing, and everybody's locked at home, and school and work are basically gone. It was such a stark, now what? Now, what was the point of all of that? And I just kept hearing that I needed to write a book, and that I needed to share my story, and I needed to help other people, and that this book would be almost like a gateway to what was next. And it took me 2 years. I committed to starting and writing the book in early 2021, and it took me 2 years to write it and publish it. Not because it took me 2 years to physically write it, but I would write for a couple of days and I would have to put it down for months, because I had to relive in detail, as I was writing it, every traumatic experience. And so my body had to reprocess from a new place everything that had happened. And so I was using it as a part of the healing journey in a lot of ways, because I now had the awarenesses to the physical, emotional, and mental and spiritual connections. And so as I'm reading and rereading, because you have to read it 50 bajillion times as you're editing and adding and all these things, it gave me opportunity to release it in a different way, and giving myself space as I did that. And so I launched and published the book in January of 2023, and became a #1 bestseller, and took my story to social media and did all of these things. But the actual process of writing was its own cathartic journey. And then launching it and having so many people reach out to me and say, I thought I was the only one. Nobody else has ever told my story like that. Only just validated for me how important it was to do this and to keep doing this and to keep sharing and putting things out there. And so, and I'm somebody, I like to talk things through. I like to share lessons, and my voice is one of my favorite ways to do that. And so as I, was doing master classes and launching programs and things like that, it became really clear that I just needed to keep speaking about it, and that the book is one avenue, but the speaking was another. And so then, and the next big message I got was that I was going to do a TEDx. And I was like, really? Me? And I was like, okay. And I applied to a couple, nothing happened. And then this new application came across my desktop, and the theme for that event, because they're all independently organized with different events, and this one was Phoenix Rising. And I went, that's mine. That's my event. And I applied and I got it. And in February of this year, I gave my TEDx talk, which is called The Healing Power of Storytelling. And so, that speaking my story on the TEDx stage was a whole different experience than writing and launching the book, because I have a live audience and I'm sharing my lessons and I speak through my story, the healing power of changing the narrative and sharing my story in a different light. And I know that the next thing that comes will come from that. And so I'm just taking and trusting the steps as they come, and that as I share, more invitations happen. And honestly, like I'm in a place where my goal is to just continue to serve and support other people and to share my lessons, and however that happens is exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, I've come to realize that I need to be outside of myself to function well in the world. I won't say properly, but well. And that usually includes working for others, helping others, and
Yep.
yeah, it's much better to be outside yourself than it is to be inside. Or for me, anyway. Well, I don't want to speak for
you. I also get stuck in my head, and I'm very cerebral, and everything is a puzzle, and those puzzles can go in circles for a very long time. And I deeply want to understand all of the components of everything. And then it can definitely lead in some darker places, 100%. But I've come to understand that a lot of times the answers the conclusions and the solving the puzzle and the pieces aren't really just for me. And if I think they're just for me, then I get stuck. But if I realize that they're in service to the world and to others, there's a different energy behind it, a different drive. And this almost, it's this entangled service where I learn something and I share it, and that comes back and supports me. And so how I want to operate in the world like that, at least right now, seems to be working better for me.
That's great. That really is great. What's next on the horizon?
Well, I do have 2 more books that I would like to write. So wow. I'm not sure when that's exactly, I'm going to get the urge and I'll get sucked down the rabbit hole and won't stop writing for some period of time once that happens. The first one I want to write is called Becoming Whole, and it's a much deeper look at the healing journey itself and the complexities of it. And the next one after that I want to write is my brain likes to pattern recognize everything about everybody. I'm very intellectual in that way, and people are my favorite puzzle, always have been. And I started to understand that every person heals differently because of the way that they focus their energy. And I found a pattern in that. And very intellectual people need to understand versus very emotional people actually need to experience and be in those feelings in a different way. And if you tell an intellectual person to feel their feelings, they go, huh? Yeah. No, I think them. They're a part of the puzzle. I don't, okay, they're in my body, whatever. But I need to understand them, not feel them. And if you tell a feeler to understand, that doesn't resonate either. And so that's just an example. So I started to see this pattern that not only do people heal and process different, but they also manifest different, and the way they experience the world is different. And so the book after that will be, it's called the Energy Type Framework. And it's just a framework of understanding that I've developed about how people operate within the world, how they communicate, how they need to be seen and heard and felt in relationships. Because if you speak to an intellectual person through your emotions, they don't hear you. Right? Like it just, and understanding that the way people are kind of goes through each lens and how they experience and process everything. And so I use that sometimes in my coaching work. And I also want to turn it into a book so that if, it resonates with people, that they can go deeper as well. So those are the 2 books that I have in the background. And then I'm still waiting for TED to publish my talk. They decide in their whenevers. About half of the talks from my event have been published, but I don't know what they're waiting for, but it will be when it is.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah. And I have a pretty strong sense that that's going to open up some other new doors as well, as because that's a different platform. And then the other thing that I'm currently working on is I have a 501(c) that I started that I need to figure out how to fund, because I would like to help remove the privilege that it takes to fight for custody from your abuser. There's a monetary and social privilege to actually creating safety when you're in an abusive marriage. And that is unacceptable to me. Like, just the fact that in itself is a privilege. And so the 501(c) is called the Golden Haven Foundation, and it would provide grants to people going through custody disputes with their abusers. It would also provide the education and mental and emotional support for people so they can be in the position to actually operate the legal system, as well as develop community. Because again, people don't talk about these things. And if you're going through an active legal dispute, you are instructed not to talk about these things. And we need to know we're not alone.
Absolutely. I can stand behind that. Does the Golden Haven have a website yet, or is it still forming everything?
It's thegoldenhaven.org. Yeah, thegoldenhaven.org. We have 501(c), but correct. Yes. And like I said, I am new to this world. So understanding how and where the grant opportunities are, how to stand all that up. I have a small board, mostly of people who have been through situations like this. So if any of your listeners want to get involved in a nonprofit, I am all for it, because I am learning as I go. But this is not just a US problem. This happens in Canada and other parts of the world. Sure. The legal system is not protective at all. And all of these, services and government agencies, and honestly, the whole thing needs to be overhauled. But until that happens, there's a huge amount of people who deeply need support in that area. And if my experience can help that, then that's, again, another thing I can do to turn this experience into...
If you don't mind, I'd like to do an email introduction between you and a friend of mine. He's worked with a bunch of 501(c)(3)s, and maybe, I don't know for sure, because this is a little bit out of what I know of his history with nonprofits, but
I would love that. Yeah, I will take any, like I said, this is a whole new world. Any thread that I can get, I trust the synchronicities of the universe today. So
you never know. You never know. Yep. So so that's awesome. Yeah, I will do an email intro, and awesome. Hopefully something positive comes of it. Let's see. And then you've got AmandaQuickHealing.com. I'll put the links in the description so people can find it easily and get in touch with you. And this has been great. I mean, it's not good. I mean, it's good that it's going in a good direction, but it's not like, it's not like happy, joy all throughout.
No, but is any part of life happy, joy, really?
No, not really.
Like, if we're honest with ourselves, that's not real.
No. We don't like to be honest with ourselves, though.
Well, I will tell you one of my superpowers, and my mom will say this, and I will always tell the truth. I'm like literally incapable of lying. It's useless.
Okay.
And I will tell the truth as I see it, even if that means triggering every single person around me. Okay. And I've learned how to do so with more tact and more empathy as I've gotten older. But I deeply believe that through honesty with ourselves, because we really like to lie to ourselves the most,
Oh yeah.
But with honesty and yep. And if we can be honest with ourselves, if we can be open to be vulnerable, and we can recognize that any judgments we hold of somebody else is only a reflection of ourselves. That's the only reason we care what anybody else does. And if we can really be in that place that we have so much potential to help somebody else heal and grow and learn. And to me, that's how we create the world that I want to be in.
Yeah, that's great. I've been surprised, wonderfully so, about how much in your story. I mean, obviously not the sex trafficking part of it, but the feelings and emotions I resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's yeah. This has been a really good show. But
none of us are alone. We all have a similar thread of things that we're going through, and
absolutely. Even though the illustrations on the pages of the book may look different, we still have pages in a book and a story to tell.
Exactly. And sometimes you telling that story is exactly what another person needs to hear.
Yep. So hopefully, prayerfully, we get somebody who takes this to heart and improves their life because of it. So so thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome.
This was it was supposed to be a double event, but the other person had something come up and quit at the last minute, and I think it was all for the best. So
everything happens for a reason.
Happen.
I now believe that in a very different way.
Even terrible things happen for a reason, and the way I've always looked at it is the reason why something happens is not in the past. We can look to the past for how something happened, but why something happened is in the future. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Yes.
So
the puzzle pieces are in a different point in time, and if we can trust, it will all come together.
For sure. So hopefully your TEDx comes out soon. Let us know, and I'll be happy to promote it. And,
awesome. Thank you.
I always ask people at the end of the episode, do you have any final words for the nice people?
Absolutely. So if I could give a gift to every single person in the world, it would be that every single person trusted themselves first, and that we stop listening to the stories orchestrated by everybody around us and listening to the ways that we were spoken to as a child and all of the self-depreciating, repatterned thoughts. And instead, we trusted our hearts and ourselves and our knowings of who we truly are. Because you are the only one who can get yourself out of any situation. You're not responsible for the creation of it, but you are the one who chooses to change.
I can stand behind that. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and to all of our viewers, be safe out there. Find your support structure. Remember to wash your hands, and stay tuned for the ending credits. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank our producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I'd especially like to thank our associate producer, Paul Hernandez III, for his contribution to the shows this month. Follow his financial channel, HDZ Financial, on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram to stay on top of the latest financial news and improve your financial literacy. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd also like to thank my special guest, Amanda Quick. Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered. Be sure to tune in next time when my special guest will be Doug Crow, who specializes in personal branding and founded Author Your Brand, a ghostwriting and publishing company. And Professor Pete Alexander. He's the president of Office Plants, professor of marketing, and a laughter yoga instructor who has a simple idea for reducing your stress. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.